It's August. My garden is cranking and I'm still planting. So in today's video, myself, Jacques, Meg, Shannie, and a special unnamed, unseen guest are gonna show you exactly what you should be planting right now in August. This barren wasteland in my side yard is actually my pick for August, especially in my warmer, mild climate of San Diego Zone 10B, and that would be artichoke. What you see before you is the start of something new, a new artichoke offshoot coming from something old. These old artichoke stumps that I planted almost 3 years ago. Every single year in zones 7 and above, artichoke is a perennial. It can be left in ground and it will come back year after year. In fact, in about 5 or 6 months, this entire area will be covered in beautiful sort of silvery green, spiky, almost prehistoric looking leaves, and then beautiful artichoke flowers. Of course, when you have an artichoke, what you're eating is an unopened, underdeveloped flower. But if you let that bloom, and you can do that, because if you do this right, you'll have more artichokes than you know what to do with. You have this beautiful purple that all the bees really like to flock to, and it's quite an ornamental beautifier to your garden. But if you're in a mild climate like myself, now is the time to plant your artichoke. You can start them in seed trays, or if you want to, you can go buy some starts from the nursery or start them from seed directly. But the beautiful thing about it is it's time to plant in fall if you have a milder winter. It lets the plant establish, and you will get 3 to 5 artichoke your very next spring. And then for many years after that, you will continue to get artichoke. What you have to do with these plants to keep them maintained though, is do what I've done. You can see a little saw mark there. I've cut that main trunk off to allow the plant to kind of go dormant during that fall season so that little offshoots like this can come up next spring. Now, if you are in a colder climate and you're saying, hey Kev, you forgot about us, I did not. What you need to do is start them indoors and then put them out after your last frost of the season, grow them through that spring, and you can even protect them over winter in zones below 7 if you cut them down and throw a bunch of mulch on top to keep that temperature buffered. So artichoke to me is one of those beautiful perennial edible plants that's very tasty, but also ornamental if you don't want to harvest it to eat.
It's midsummer, and if you're anything like me, you're thinking about tomatoes day in, day out. But right now, I'm starting to get a little bit too hot, and I'm thinking about those delicious, crisp, cool fall nights. We're not having tomatoes on the table, we're eating something else, and that is broccoli. Now you might think I'm absolutely crazy to tell you to start broccoli at this time of the year in August when it's so hot, but there is a 2-part strategy here that will guarantee that you'll get some broccoli, maybe earlier than anyone else. Growing broccoli at this time of the year is all about variety selection. So here I have Belstar, a more traditional standard heading broccoli, and Kailan, a Chinese style broccoli. Both of these have been bred to tolerate some amount of heat and will give you a much better chance of success when growing them in the summertime like we are right now. So what I'm going to do is start all these seeds and then place my tray somewhere where it gets a little bit of shade in the afternoon. And once those seedlings emerge, we can move on to the next step. It'll take about 2 to 4 weeks for those seedlings to be ready to go out into your garden. So try to think about a spot that soon will be harvested out and free. Right here, I have a bush bean section in my raised bed. By that point, I'll be done with these. I'll harvest them out and I'll swap in my broccoli. And the great thing about doing a small amount of broccoli at this point of the year is that if the summer is actually cooler towards the end, I'll have a massive harvest of broccoli come fall. If it's too hot, all I'm going to lose are those 6 plants and nothing else.
Guess what? It is finally time to start chaos gardening again here in Zone 8A. And one of my absolute favorite things to chaos garden are your cool weather root crops. In my experience, I feel like root crops love to just be thrown on the ground and forgotten about until they start to pop up. And if you've been around long enough, you know that one of my favorite chaos planting combos are your carrots and your quick growing radishes. I absolutely love growing these two together. I do it every spring and every fall. And your radishes are gonna be so quick growing that they're gonna be ready to harvest before your carrots even really get going. So that act of harvesting the radishes kind of loosens up the soil so that the carrots can grow a little bit better, and it helps out with the task of thinning. So they are great companion plants. This is just an example of an entire bed that I chaos gardened with carrots and radish. And the radish have been harvested for quite some time now, but the carrots continue to grow all spring into the summer. They're fully mature now, they're ready to harvest, and it's actually getting a little bit too hot for them now. So I really need to get in here and get to harvesting. So August is the perfect time to mix some of these up. And if you're not a lazy gardener like myself, you can mix these up in an old herb shaker or something like that, and then shake them them onto the soil, and that kind of just helps with a more even seed distribution than with your fingers, and that can help with thinning later on. But if you're like me, you're just gonna mix them up in your hand and just use your fingers anyway. And I'm gonna be sprinkling these anywhere in the garden that I can find space, honestly. I kind of have a little bit of a planning issue, so there's not that much open space, but I will find some. After sprinkling, I'll just run my hands through the soil just to give them a little bit of like seed to soil contact, and then I'm done. My carrots and radishes are planted for the fall. Another really great root crop planting combo that I love are beets and turnips planted together. I planted these together back in the spring and I had a lot of really great success with it, so I'm gonna be planting them together again this fall.
It's August. I have made it through a long, hot summer of surviving on tropical and subtropical perennial vegetables, and it is time for me to finally plan out my fall garden and pivot over to my more temperate, climate-loving annual veggies. So one I am so excited to get started are my green beans. That's it, just the standard, common Phaseolus vulgaris French green bean. I've been craving it. I cannot wait to get it planted. There's a reason that most of us learned how to grow beans in elementary school as our science experiment. They're very easy to germinate. So we're going to sow them 1 inch deep in the soil, or about twice as deep as they are big. And we are going to space our beans out differently depending on whether they are a pole bean or a bush bean. I usually like to sow my seeds about 3 inches apart, thinning them to a final spacing of 6 inches apart. This can differ depending on my trellis style and how much space I'm working with. A good rule of thumb in the Deep South is to space your plants out a bit further to promote better air circulation. I always direct seed by green beans. Green beans are known to have a shallow and delicate root system that's easily damaged by being transplanted. So if you do choose to start your beans indoors and transplant them out, just be super careful with that transplanting. You don't want to damage those delicate, shallow roots. And the key is to keep picking those pods readily. As soon as those pods start to mature and the beans start to harden, it sends a signal to the plant to slow production. So we want to keep those pods picked as quickly as we can.
There are a ton of different things that we consume or maybe use on a day-to-day basis without having any idea of what that plant actually looks like. And one of those that recently shocked me was actually flaxseed. Flax is not just an extremely useful thing for the edible seed or the oils that you could produce from it, it's also an extremely beautiful plant. So let me show you how to start them in ground and as transplants, because you'll want to have this in your garden. This variety is called scarlet flax for its scarlet colored flowers, and it's not actually an edible seed variety, but we do have one called Blue and Breezy that makes wonderful blue flowers that is also edible. The nice thing about flax is that it's extremely heat and drought tolerant, whether you start it in spring or in summer for late fall. And the way you want to grow it is actually directly in ground if you can. I like to start by roughing up the soil, getting it all wet, scattering seeds, watering it again, and then once you've done that, your seeds should be good to go. But let me show you how to do it as a transplant in case you want to transplant them later on. The reason why we're starting the seeds in such a weird way, both in ground and now for a transplant, is because these seeds need light to germinate. So that's why I didn't bury them back there when I put them in the ground. And when I do them in the seed tray, I'm likewise not going to bury them. Instead, what I'm going to do is scatter the seeds on the surface just like this. And then what you could do is either press them in using your finger. That'll help give them good soil contact. Or if you're worried that they will dry out before they germinate, you could use something like vermiculite scattered over the surface, which holds on to water while letting some light through to ensure good germination. But flax, regardless of how you start it, is going to be a wonderful plant and a beautiful flower in your garden.
This next crop loves the cool weather just a little bit more than the others. So if you live in a warmer climate, you're gonna wait until the later half of August, maybe even the end of August to plant it, and that is snap peas. I absolutely love growing snap peas in the fall because if you can't tell, I love growing vertically. I love the look of an arched trellis or any kind of trellis just full of plants. Not only are they beautiful growing up a trellis, they're also extremely tasty. I love eating them just as like a snack walking through the garden, but they're also delicious in stir fries, salads. You can pickle them. You can really do anything with them. They're really versatile. Two of my favorite varieties of snap peas are Sugar Daddy and Sugar Magnolia, and they grow pretty differently. Sugar Daddy is more compact. They only grow like 2 to 3 feet tall, so this is really great for like a balcony gardener or somebody short on space, whereas Sugar Magnolia grows pretty long, pretty vigorous vines that you do need a decent sized trellis for. I'm really digging this A-frame trellis that's new to Epic this year. It's really tall. I'm growing cucumbers up it right now, but they're almost finished because we are in our rainy season, our powdery mildew season here in North Carolina. So as soon as I rip these out, I'm gonna be replacing it with some sugar snap peas. To plant snap peas, you wanna plant them directly into the soil at the base of a trellis. I never start these in seed trays because they don't really like root disturbance at all. So just directly into the soil will do. You wanna make sure you're planting them about 1 inch in depth, and you can space them pretty close together, about every 2 inches apart or so. And then in a few months, you'll see what they're named after, and you'll start hearing those snaps when you're harvesting them right off the vine.
August is the perfect time to sow your tomato seeds to transplant out for a more mild fall season. Best tomatoes that I've grown down here in Florida have been the ones I started in August and grew throughout the fall. Proper variety selection is so essential for growing in these humid and disease-prone areas of the Deep South. I stick to the smaller sized tomatoes. I love chocolate cherries. Anything cherry sized is a great bet for this region. I tend to avoid the beefsteaks, the super large tomatoes, as they don't often ripen before they get hit by pests and disease. I start my tomatoes in fall just like I would any other time of year, so I sow those seeds 1/8 to 1/4 inch deep, pretty shallow. I like to keep my trays in the coolest place possible because I'm starting them in such a hot time of year, and I absolutely don't let those trays dry out. They're not going to be soggy, but I'm going to make sure that the water is consistent. Kevin recently shared a really handy tip about finishing your tomatoes ripening process in the windowsill. Try that one out, especially if you grow in the Deep South, because it's going to prevent getting attacked by certain pests that love your ripe tomatoes. I'm gonna grow those tender little seedlings on in a shady and cooler environment until it is time to transplant them out. I'm going to use a Florida weed. They also grow beautifully with a tomato cage or up a trellis. The key is that we make sure to space our tomatoes adequately apart. 2.5, 3 feet is perfect. That way we're getting some airflow between our plants and we're preventing some of those diseases that love high humidity. It's also not a bad idea to prune some of that lower foliage so that we've got better airflow to the plants as well.
Finally, my time to shine. Eric here, San Diego, Zone 10B. Little known secret, I'm really the brains behind this epic gardening operation. Kevin, as you've seen for years, has been stealing my work for a very long time. So I'm here, I've got 2 picks for you. Actually, 1 pick, 2 varieties. Fennel. That's what you should be planting right now in August. Kevin's been keeping this one under wraps for a very long time, so it's time for me to take the cat out of the bag. Fennel, the perfect plant to be putting in the garden in a mild climate right about now in August. Why? Fennel's the ultimate triple threat, my friends. Ever had those Good and Plenty candies as a kid? I used to have them all the time. They're so tasty. If you eat the unopened flower of a fennel, it tastes exactly like Good and Plenty candy. But if you let it keep going, what do you have here? Fennel seed. That's a spice. That's our second thread. What's the third thread? To make fennel a triple threat, it's the bulb down below. It's a 90 to 100 day crop. You're gonna take that bulb out of the ground, cut it in half, roast it. You've got so many dishes that you can make with that, and you can just let it grow. It looks beautiful. You can turn it into a little sort of candy popper, or you can use the seed, or you can simply just use it as a pollinator plant. What you wanna be doing is probably sowing it indoors, or probably sowing it in some seed trays, transplanting it out, buried about 1/4 inch deep, give it ample water, and it will rip just like this. So my first tip here on the scene, on the channel, even though really every tip's been coming from your boy Eric, not Kev. Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to see some more planting guides and chores, check out this video right here. Any of the seeds you see, you can shop at Kev's company, botanicalinterests.com. I actually own 100% of that company. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.